Hello model car fans, welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Raul, and this week I'm going to show you my completed GT40 Roadster here. This is the 1965 Le Mans race Roadster. For those of you who don't know, there really weren't a whole lot of Roadsters actually made. Now when it came to the GT40 program, Ford was going all out on it. There were 12 prototypes, and of those 12 prototype cars that were built in January 64 all the way to March of 65, and they were all hand built in England. Just about every GT40 was built in England, but the first 12 were they had different chassis numbers. They were GT101 through GT112, and the Roadsters were chassis number GT108, 109, 110, 111, and 112. So the last 5 were Roadsters, and they were all prototypes. And they were all pretty much different. But they took them out racing, and they were just driving them crazy. Now, when it came to the prototypes, the very first 2, GT101 and 102, they took those out racing, and a lot of them were just disasters. They went to Le Mans of 64, 24 Hours Le Mans of 64, and one was destroyed there, and then the very next race, 102, was destroyed. So they just weren't finishing races. They were rushed into racing with not a whole lot of testing and work done to them. So I mean, they had a lot of teething to do. And then they continued making them, and then they decided they were going to do Roadsters, which Roadsters were run quite a bit at Le Mans at the time, but they started to run into some serious problems where they were having not enough airflow over the roof, and not enough downforce in the back. So some of them are really rounded, some of them have some serious wings on them, but there are 5 Roadsters only, which is what I'm focusing on right now. It's just the 5 Roadsters, which this is chassis GT109, and it went to Shelby, and it went through some serious teething there, where Shelby, when they test them, they drove them till they broke, and when they broke, they would figure out what was wrong with it and fix it. And that's what they did, and that's how they won races. Was they broke them, and they did everything they can to break them, so they would find out what would break and fix them. This one being it's one of 2 to actually be entered in a race, but this one is the only one to go to Le Mans. So in 1965, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, Ford entered 6 GT40s, and only one of them was this Roadster. It was the France entry for Ford. And it was actually the 13th on the grid, slowest of the 6 GT40s entered, and which was kind of a hint of things to come. And while it was a Le Mans entry, and the only Le Mans entry for Ford of 1965 for the Roadster, it didn't do very well. It had some transmission problems, and after 11 laps, it was DNF for the race. It was done. They couldn't do it. But it was a total disaster for Ford. Not one of the GT40s survived, and they didn't compete more than 100 laps. So they were just falling apart. So in 65, they entered 6 cars, and they had all of them fell apart. So it was a total disaster for 65 compared to 66, when they had completed the race in this fantastic 1-2-3 finish. But there was a lot that they had been through, and a lot that they had learned, and many things that they have gone through. But this particular car, it had been through a lot. So it's kind of interesting history. Now, after the race, it went back to Shelby, and it went through some testing, and Shelby had held on to it, and it was used for development purposes, but the Le Mans race was its only actual race. Now, Shelby had done a bunch of things to it. They took the Borani wire wheels off of it and changed it to the magnesium wheels, and a lot of different tweaks. So each one of these was different. And when you look at the prototype cars, the first 12, they were constantly changing. They were trying all kinds of things. So, and then most of them didn't survive today. But this car still exists, which is kind of ironic. As it went back to Shelby, they rebuilt it, redid it, and then it just sat. So in 1968, this is where it gets kind of fun and interesting in how it survived. Dean Jeffries, who was a good friend of Shelby's, and he was a racer, and He was just very involved. He saw the car stashed in a warehouse, and he was interested in it. And by then, it had a different transaxle in it, and it had a 4-cam Indy motor in it along with that transaxle. So it was heavily modified. It was not in its original GT40 configuration. Shelby did sell it to him. Shelby was the original owner, so Gene Jeffries became the second owner, buying it in 1968. And then Shelby, being a good friend, gave him a competition 289, which is what it had in it, and claimed that, you know, that was the actual engine they used in the race car at the race at Le Mans. Today it's restored with that motor, and it's claimed that that is the motor that it raced with, even though it was taken out and put back in. But Dean Jeffries held onto the car, put it back together, and he did enjoy it. He was a guy on the streets in California. He got it for next to nothing, which is kind of amazing. But he wanted to save it, and at the time it was just a used race car and it had no value. And when it came to the GT40s, nobody cared about the Roadsters because they were considered failures. Matter of fact, they looked at them as kind of parts cars. 4 of the 5 had survived up to that point. Dean got his hands on it, and he held on to it until about 2013 when he passed away, and then Dana Meekum bought the car. He restored it, a 3-year restoration, to how it appears now, which is pretty much, this is how it was at the race with the French colors of blue, red, and then the number 15 on it at Le Mans. This is how it appeared at the race, which I think is kind of funny. There's blue and red stripes and then a black stripe on the side, but that is pretty accurate, and how it was restored. But it was put back to as raced, and a beautiful car, and it's really cool that it still exists. And a couple more of the GT Roadsters exist. There's a green one, and then there's also a more of a street white one that I know about. I've seen pictures of the 3 of those cars. Don't know about the 4th one. And the 5th one, which was actually the one done after this, GT110, that's the one I really like, but that has a whole different story along with it. It was the only one that was an aluminum monocoque instead of steel. These ones were steel. So 4 of them were steel, 1 of them was aluminum. That aluminum one, it had a completely different front end on it, and they put some wings on it, and they tried racing it. So it has a little bit of race history. There's like a couple races it went to, and then Shelby got a hold of it, put a 427 in it, put Mark II back end on it and front end on it. So it's the only one that's red with a Mark II and a roof on it. I've seen photos of that, and I was pretty excited about that. So I want to build that one. So the ugliest Roadster and the coolest Roadster are both the same car. It's the aluminum car. It's just 2 different configurations and how it completely changed. And that one went to another race for Shelby and actually won. There's one other GT40 Roadster that raced, but that car was destroyed, so it no longer exists, and it's a long story on that one. So I'll probably get into that one when I build that one. But this build, this was a lot of fun, and if you followed along on my channel, it was quite challenging, as it's a resin kit from DDP models. So here's there's the box, DDP models, 1/24 scale. And they only did a few of these, but pretty nice kit. And I did enjoy building it, but I took my time on it because it was a bit of a challenge, as it's all resin and photo etch and pretty challenging, and a lot of fitting. So if you've seen the updates on it, there's been a lot of fitting. So there's a pewter radiator in the front and the grills and what I went through to mount these lights, which they provide. And then all of this stuff is pretty much out of the box from them. I added the decals on the tires, which that wasn't provided. Those were just transfers, and the decals were provided in the kit. But there's a lot of trimming, sanding, and fitting, and then there's really nothing of the underside. And I mean, it's white pewter. Rear axle, there's really nothing for front suspension. The wheels are white metal, also pewter, and a lot of photo etch around the windows, and then vacuum formed windows. So there was a lot of fitting and a lot of things going on with this, and I just picked some white. It's actually Chevrolet Dove white, which is kind of an off-white, but it goes really well with it. And the decals are provided, and I shot it with my Real Automotive Clear. And I'll tell you, that interior, doing all of those parts in there, and using the chrome multi-low pen for all of those buttons. It's kind of fun. And then you can see the seat belts right there. Got the seat belts in, and the interior is actually a dark blue. I'm pretty proud of the interior and how it came out. I added those grab handles right there. They didn't come in the kit. It's about the only thing I added. And then the fire bottle and some of the other stuff in there. Boy, it's really picking up the interior there. That's a good shot. You can almost see the cluster and gauges in there. Oops, hit the camera. And the decals in there, which is kind of funny. It only came with 5 decals instead of 7, but I covered that in my build. Those came from another one. You really can't see the engine. There's a cover there and a screen there. You can see the exhaust through it, and then the exhaust pipes and the tail lights. But everything here needed a little bit of shaving, trimming, fitting, getting it to work. So really pleased with the results on it, but this took quite a bit of effort to actually get done and make everything fit. But I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. So quite a bit of work to get it done. And then the photo etched wiper, you can see right there, and the double gas doors, and the tanks are on both sides. Just a lot of work and a lot of fitting and sanding, but really pleased with how it came out. And you know, it won't be my last GT40 Roadster, and I've got some conversion kits and some other ones to do. So there'll be a couple more that show up, but this one was quite a challenge, and I'm glad it's completed, and really happy with it. But I will continue on building some of these, and this one's pretty cool and very significant car, very long history. So you know, I babbled on about some of the history and just jumped around, but there's just so much, especially on these GT40s and what they've been through. How a company like Ford have never even been to Le Mans just threw some cars at it and then managed to get everything lined up where they won Le Mans in 66, 67, 68, and 69. So 4 years straight. But the first 2 years they went to Le Mans, 64 and 65, were just disasters. And this was the 65 entry, the only Roadster entered. But to me, just a very cool, very significant car, and really happy that I was able to get this kit and build it. So very cool. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing and watching. I appreciate all of it and all of your comments. And I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. It was a bit of a challenge at times, and you know, got tossed in the box a couple of times, like, all right, and yeah, I'll work on this, work on that, get a little frustrated, start over. But thank you for tuning in and subscribing, and you guys, you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next Saturday.